Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Ray, and welcome to the Wenderlich.com podcast. In this podcast, we'll keep you up to date with the latest app development tech talk. Now, here are your hosts, Dru Freeman and Jenn Bailey.
Thanks, Ray. This is the Ray Wenderlich podcast. Welcome to episode 4 for season 9. This episode was recorded on Saturday, the 11th of May, 2019, and is sponsored by Triple Byte. That's Byte, B-Y-T-E. I am Jenn Bailey, here with my WWDC bound season 9 co-host, Dru Freeman.
Thanks, Jen. On this episode, we have Sean Allen. Sean is the creator and talent for the widely popular iOS development YouTube channel, Sean Allen. He also wrote the book, It's Only Crazy Until You Do It. He's a self-taught iOS engineer with 4 years of experience, spending about half his career leading client-side iOS development for small startups in Silicon Valley, and the other half doing independent contracting. Now, he's contracted on multiple iOS applications ranging from payment tracking, real-time voice communication, food tracking, to elementary education. Did we mention he also runs a YouTube channel teaching iOS development and Swift to tens of thousands of aspiring developers? We'll give you the links in the show notes. He's a basketball junkie. You can see that on his t-shirt. An iOS YouTuber. We mentioned that once or twice. It's very important you know that. Star Wars and Game of Thrones nerd, hodler, and a feverish learner.
In this episode, we're going to discuss supercharging your development career through content creation. Then in the second half, we make our last predictions about the upcoming toys Apple may give us at the developer conference. Sean, welcome.
Jen, Dru, thanks for having me. It's kind of an honor to be here. I got my start learning via Ray Wenderlich, so it's kind of nice to finally come full circle and participate in the show.
Well, I mean, I watch your podcast and your YouTube channel regularly, and it feels like I'm not trying to say that it feels like it's part of the Ray Wenderlich world, but it's got a really great level of tutorial. It's great to follow. I was mentioning just before the show that I was watching your recent Macaw video, which is really great because graphing is one of those things I always tend to avoid when I'm doing any kind of application, because the frameworks that I have come across in the past have always just been 100% documentation and 5% me looking at that documentation going, am I really going to set out for this?
Right. Is it, yeah, without naming any names, I can imagine one of them. It's one I use as well. And the documentation is not the greatest. There's a lot of trial and error to figure that out. But yeah, Macaw was pretty nice. I enjoyed using that framework.
So I was commenting earlier, I love your setup for your YouTube show. It's wonderful because you've got the green screen, but most people green screen their entire picture and just put stuff randomly. You've got yourself located in the bottom corner, and you don't seem to mind that there's a square of green screen and then you're cut off. And I think it works fantastically because it gives you a really great focus on your background.
Yeah, I like showing my face on the thing because I feel like it gives it a more personal feel, personal touch to, someone teaching you something. So it's important to me to have the face, because when I see some tutorials that are just the screen, it feels very, like I said, like impersonal. Can't talk. So I wanted that on there. And I did have like the full no green screen. And then, when you're building this, content, you always want to strive for better and better quality of your production value. So especially, maybe we can dive into this a little later, but I'm about to go full-time YouTube here on July 1st. And now the production quality is going to go like sky high now that I have a lot of time to do it. But we should address my setup a little bit, because if you can see, my apartment is destroyed. Those of you watching on the video in the back, because I'm building a video game streaming setup. I'm venturing into Twitch here soon. But you mentioned the green screen. That little thing back there is the roll-up green screen, nice and portable. It's really all how I do it.
You have a strange definition of the word little.
Yeah, it's true. It actually, it looks bigger than it is, but compared to like some other green screen setups, it's very convenient.
Yeah, I recently obtained my first circular green screen, or more the elliptoid green screen, it's really wonderful. It's a great green and blue on the back screen, but unfortunately it is one of those elliptoids, and anybody who's used an elliptoid green screen knows that folding it back into the bag is a nightmare.
Right. It springs back out all the time, right?
It's got this sort of reverse torus Mobius loop kind of, I don't know. I don't think it's Euclidean in its nature.
Right.
So one of the things that we're going to be talking about today, or for the first half, is the fact that coding really does pay the rent, but now and more developers are finding that the content creation is lucrative, if not more lucrative.
Yeah, and for many different ways. Like many people might hear that and think just lucrative financially, but it's super fulfilling as well. It sounds kind of cheesy, but I've gotten plenty of the whole, you've changed my life kind of emails from people that, because my journey, not to get too much into the backstory, is I wrote my first line of code in my early 30s. Most people think you have to code as a child and your whole life to be a programmer. So
Wow.
my channel really speaks to people that are hopefully trying to make the same transition I did, right? Where they just pick up code later in life and like, hey, this is what I really want to do. So that's what I try to make my channel, speak to. So back to how it's fulfilling is I'm actually helping people like that. Now that I've been doing it for like 2 years, I've personally coached and seen people go from never writing code as an adult, learning code, and now they're like full-time iOS developers. So yes, it's starting to become, financially, I wouldn't say lucrative yet, but it's getting there. It's a slow build, but the fulfilling part is just as good.
Oh, that's really amazing that you started later in life. I know a lot of people, I work at community college, who would be really inspired to hear that.
Yeah, and I had that misconception too. And again, to give a little backstory of how it even happened is I moved out to Silicon Valley to be like into the investing side of it, angel investing, venture capital, eventually that kind of thing. But when I started working on my first startup, it was a small 5-person startup. And I just became friends with the developers there and started like looking over their shoulder, like, hey, what are you doing? What's that? Tell me about this. And I always knew that, like, especially here in Silicon Valley, that developers are treated very well. I can just leave it at that. I think everybody knows that. So knowing that and seeing what they did, I just became curious and just started doing it on my own, because I always had the misconception that I think a lot of people have is, like I said, you had to be coding since you were 6 years old or a math prodigy, right? I just always had that misconception. But really, as especially you at the Ray Wenderlich site know, because we probably have similar clientele, that's not the case. Everybody can do it.
Yeah, I think, and the reason that the impression is that you have to start coding as a kid. Now, admittedly, I'm one of those weird ones who did start coding as a kid. But then again, when I started coding as a kid, coding was a lot different. Is that coding, the entry level has become a lot easier. It's become definitely not as daunting, so that we can teach it to children. And as a result, it is something that anyone can begin to pick up. I remember one WWDC or a similar con, they introduced an 87-year-old woman who had just started coding in the past year or two. And I think that's really a credit to the entire field. I always try to introduce as many people as I can to it. I've got my son who's just on the verge of 13 coding now. And I also started teaching my mother-in-law to code as well, and she's asking if she can help me with my personal projects. So
she's going to be sending a pull request for you.
Sword. Yeah, that's a double-edged sword there.
I believe that. But yeah, and another thing I like about kind of creating the content and putting it out there is I'm also helping, kind of like you mentioned, like the next generation of developers come up, because I have a lot of, like you mentioned, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, and a lot of them are actually WWDC scholars. So I get to see like the stuff they're making. And I just look at them in awe, and I'm like I said, I didn't start till I was mid-30s. And I'm like, I know what I was doing at 15. It certainly wasn't this kind of stuff, So I just look at that and I'm like, man, if I was doing that at 15, like, where would I be now? So I'm just so happy for those kids that are getting into this that early, because, coding's not going away, right? It's only going to become more and more required as we go into the future.
Yeah, I think it's going to become just another language that they'll teach in high school or they'll teach in elementary school. My son was actually being taught Spanish in his elementary school, which surprised me because I didn't get language choices until I was in high school, but such is the time changing. So what made you decide to jump to the YouTube channel, and how did you get the setup that you decided on?
So what made me jump to the YouTube channel was spite. It's funny because I'll explain that real quick. So basically in early 2017, that's when I started my channel. I'm only about 1.5 years into my programming career. Again, starting from no prior background or no CS degree. And I was getting interview requests from like the Facebooks and the like here in San Francisco, which they pretty much ask everybody to interview there. So I went out and interviewed at the big companies, only 1.5 years into my career. And I got destroyed, right? But I felt cheated after that process, because they didn't care about like me, my background, passion, work ethic. All they cared about was how I did on this coding problem in a half hour in like a random interview setting, right? And I felt cheated. So I was like, I know I'm better than I perform. So my idea was like, okay, let me just put out my knowledge into the world. So that's why I started the YouTube channel where I was doing tutorials. And I was like, hopefully 2, 3, 4 years down the line, I'll just get hired sight unseen because people will know me. They'll know what I can do. Like all my work is out there. I'm constantly talking about it. So that was kind of the origin story of it, more of a marketing thing. Again, because I felt cheated in the interview process, but it has since evolved and morphed into more of the, like once I started getting those "you changed my life" kind of emails, that was like the new drug for me. I was like, oh, that's what it's all about. That's what I'm chasing now. So now it's not so much a marketing play for me. It's more of a helping people play.
Suddenly I have an urge to plug our sponsor, Triple Byte, which does the entire thing where they just they do the gradual testing of you rather than check your background or that. I will admit I also am one of these people who's terrified of the coding section of an interview. I can usually sail through the entire interview with discussion and general knowledge questions, and then it's like, now we want you to code a question, and
Yeah.
everybody just suddenly feels like they're on the spot. It's not how it works in reality for any of us. Nothing is solve our problem in 30 minutes.
With it, and I always say, like, I can't write my name if somebody's looking over my shoulder, let alone try to solve a random coding problem that I've never heard before that you threw at me as you're watching me do it. Like, it's a weird setting. So I wanted to just put out all my information out there so people knew what I knew. So hopefully they wouldn't be like, hey, we need to test your abilities. Like, we know what you can do. That was kind of the idea.
That is awesome. And I agree. Another thing I like about Triple Byte is it's so much more about skills than it is degrees. We need to teach skills, not just hand out degrees in the education sector. But
so I got to ask, Sean, do you actually carry a bachelor's degree, or
Yeah,
you just not have one in?
No, I have two. I did go to school. I went for economics and finance. So I am definitely into the whole finance world. And that's, like I said, what kind of led me out to San Francisco, Silicon Valley, is because I wanted to get into angel investing and early investing in startups. Because I always felt like I had a good eye. I've always been an early adopter. And I've always felt I had a good eye to be like, okay, that's going to be big. So that was the whole goal, to move out to San Francisco. But I got derailed into the development thing, which I don't mind at all. I love it here.
Now, you'd said that when you originally went out for the interviews with these companies, they destroyed you and things did not go well. I'm assuming because from our conversations, you said once you put all that stuff out there and people saw you, now the companies are coming to you.
Yeah, and not just like the typical recruiter reach out that all developers kind of get. Like, like iOS managers are like, hey, we want you, like, please come interview, and I've been fast tracked to just the final onsite, like no like initial recruiter screen, no 1 hour technical screen. It's just come on for the onsite to like PayPal and YouTube. So like some of the biggest companies in the world. So it's definitely benefited just having that. And I don't want to make it sound like that's just based on my skill. It was more so just having a good presence, online presence in the community, being a known kind of personality. And it does matter because people do see the videos, and kind of, I think what sets me apart from some others, to be a little braggy here, is my ability to like break down complex things into normal human language to help, regular people learn that maybe don't have a CS degree. So I think people see my communication skills, and that is a big thing too, kind of to bring it back to what we said about not just testing for, can you solve this one random coding problem? Because I just believe like the soft skills are just as important as the hardcore technical skills.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I was watching your video on Macaw, and I love the pacing of it. I love how you basically say, okay, we're going to set something up here. I'm going to explain what that is. I'm going to outline how I want to do this, and here's the specific calls to do that outline. I'm just going to stub them out, but you can see the outline of how we're going to solve this problem. Mm-hmm. And that really is at the core of what they are looking for in all of those interview hell moments, is that it comes down to be calm and break down how you're thinking through the problem. It takes a lot of practice to know that really what it comes down to is voice your thinking rather than solve the problem.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, and even not working, in the industry for 4 years now, I think we've all worked with developers who like can't communicate what they're thinking, and they can't, portray their ideas. And it's almost useless if you're brilliant and have this great idea if you can't communicate it to people and get it across.
Let's see. I was As you mentioned, I was rather taken aback. For years, I wanted to do podcasting. I couldn't actually find a topic, and thanks to Ray, I wound up doing this show. I was really quite surprised during one of my last interviews. I spoke to the company, and the person interviewing me, or the person on the original phone screen, said, "So I just want to ask you, are you Dru Freeman from the podcast?" Yes. Oh, good. I listened to you. I was like, okay. All of a sudden, I had handed him a separate resume just because of that information, and that it took me aback, but it's really quite astounding.
Yeah, that's kind of what I say about this content creation stuff. It is the 2019 resume, and I only use 2019 because that's what year it is now. But it is the modern resume, like you said. People know, kind of like I talked about earlier. I wanted people to know me already. They're not just looking, and we all know people skim resumes in like 10 seconds, right? So they may not get everything. But and back to kind of like how the companies reached out to me, it was because I do 2 podcasts. People listen to that. That's where one of them directly came from. They're like, "Hey, I love you on your podcast, Swift Over Coffee." Quick plug. And I just love listening to that. So I heard because I had said because I'm just very open and transparent about my career plans, my career goals, and I had just shared that. Which is another thing about content creation. Little side note is, don't worry about like being an expert on a topic. I always say just like share your truth, be humble, be honest, and people like really resonate with that. So I was just sharing my career goals, what I wanted out of my career, my journey. And like I said, engineering managers listened to the show. They heard that and they reached out and they're like, "Yeah, come on down. We'd love to have you down."
This has led to you not just mainly doing the stuff on your end, but you've now been pulled out and you're doing speeches at conferences internationally.
Yeah, that was fun. I just spoke in London in March at iOSCon 2019. And again, that comes about from just being a presence in the community and the YouTube channel and stuff. So let's kind of bring this back to kind of the opportunities you'll get with the content creation. And I'm not saying, let me give a disclaimer. I'm not saying if you're a developer, you have to create content. I'm not telling everybody you have to have a YouTube channel. But I think it's objectively true that if you're doing a podcast, doing a YouTube channel, doing a blog, whatever you like to do, you will have more opportunities if you build up that blog and that presence than you would if you didn't do it. Now what you do with those opportunities is completely different. So one of the opportunities I got was to, speak in London, which was awesome. I had a ton of fun there. My talk was, I say I did my first ever talk on hard mode because it was live coding. It was 30 Xcode tips in 30 minutes. So I'm up there just flying through Xcode, giving keyboard shortcuts and everything like that. And of course, Xcode did mess up on me, right? So it's a rite of passage. Wouldn't be a talk without it. But yeah, back to kind of like the opportunities, they snowball. I always talk about it as like compound interest, right? You may get one small opportunity that's going to lead to a bigger one that leads to a bigger one. So I met a ton of people at this conference that I think is going to lead to more speaking opportunities, which again could just open up doors that are impossible to foresee.
So you're on YouTube. You've got the podcasts. Let's talk about the flip side of all of this. The internet is not always kind.
No.
How is feedback for what you do? How does that tend to fly?
I think I'm very lucky because my audience and people on my videos, it's very minimal. You do hear all the horror stories about YouTube comment sections, and they are true for the most part. But I think I'm very fortunate that I think my like to dislike ratio is like 99% or something like that. But in the feedback I do get, because let's be honest, I've made 240 something videos, I think. So when you're putting your developer knowledge out there and coding in front of people, thousands of developers, right? You put code in front of 1,000 developers, you're going to get people that are going to nitpick every little bit of it, or you forgot this, you forgot to do that.
It's the ultimate code review.
That's it. It's exactly where I was going with this. Is that I have learned so much from the comments, even the snarky ones. I'm like, okay, well, you're right. You're snarky, but you're right. So it is actually, and that's another benefit of this is you're going to learn more. Not only if you have the gumption to put yourself out there and teach something, you better know it cold, especially if you're putting it on the internet. So you're going to learn it more that way. But any little hole you missed, somebody is going to fill in because they're going to comment on it. Like I think programmers just can't help themselves, right? By kind of like commenting on something you missed. So to answer your question, the feedback has been great. I mean, I've had a few people tell me to shave my beard, which I'll never do. But other than that, it's been overwhelmingly positive. And like you just mentioned, the ultimate code review, I would go far to say is it has definitely made me a better developer because, again, thousands of people looking at it, they're going to see things you don't.
So how often are you turning these videos around now?
It goes in spurts because, like, for example, when I was preparing for that talk in March, that took up a ton of my time because I do have a full-time job for now. Maybe we'll get down to later. So full-time job and preparing for that talk, and I play basketball 4 or 5 days a week. So like didn't have enough time. So sometimes it'll go, through some dips, but right now I'm gearing up to go full-time on July 1st. So I'm really starting to knock them out and probably going to do about 2 or 3 a week leading up until July 1st here, especially around WWDC week, which we'll talk about in a bit. That's like a huge content week for me for obvious reasons.
Yeah, for all of us.
Yeah.
So let's take one of your standard Swift tutorial videos.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about the preparation, how the production, how long it takes to put one of those together.
Yeah, well, we can use 2 examples here. That macaw video that we've been talking about, which is my most recent video, that one took about 10 to 12 hours all told. Because I had to figure out the framework, because it's, using the Cocoa coordinate system. I wasn't, I'm so used to doing things in auto layout. So I had to learn the framework, get it working right. And then once I get it working, then back to your point about how I outlined it, then I kind of say, okay, I have this working. What is the best way to teach it? And then, so that takes some time to kind of figure that out. And then I kind of do a little rehearsal, kind of going through it in my head. And then what happens, I have to like delete all the code and keep like a little screenshot of it and then kind of go through, type it and explain it. And then really what takes the most time is editing, which I'm sure you can relate to if you're editing these podcasts. So yeah, that macaw tutorial probably took 5-6 hours to edit, let alone like figure out, film. And then even after the edit and you hit publish, the work's not done because you got to be in there answering comments. I'm putting it out on Twitter, putting it out on Instagram, interacting with the Twitter comments and stuff like that. So a video like that, again, was like 10 to 12 hours all told. Then there's some tutorials, and I try to do a mixture of like really in-depth ones to relatively quick ones. There's some that I can knock out in like 2 or 3 hours. Like there's one I'm about to do, like the how to do a shake to. So you may be familiar. Do you know somebody took the Ray Wenderlich Swift Algorithms Club and put that into an app?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you can do a shake to like go to dark mode or light mode. Well, I'm doing a tutorial this weekend about how to implement that shake to do something. So you shake the device and you can change like the background color. So a tutorial like that, which is minimal code, I can probably knock that out in like 2 hours or so. So it really depends.
Nice. And just from a technical point of view, I'm probably people who are more in the production side of things are curious. What kind of microphone are you using for this?
I'm using the ever popular Blue Yeti.
Aha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find a lot of people there are about 3 to 5 that come down. I use the Rode Podcaster. It seems to do a good job for the voice, though I haven't quite found the right position for it to make me happy.
Right. I actually ordered so for that streaming setup back there, everybody sees, I have another Blue Yeti back there. I just ordered a boom arm. So I'm going to start experimenting with that to see if that works. That actually should get delivered today. So more boxes for me to have laying around.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think it's good to note that people may see my YouTube channel, think it's kind of, big, but I'm still on my like first level of equipment. Like I got the Blue Yeti because that was like what everyone recommended. And I know there's more higher end ones. My camera is a Canon M3, which is still a nice, mirrorless camera, but it's not like a crazy high end camera. I guess the point I'm trying to make is I'm still on my quote unquote beginner setup because I bought all this stuff thinking like, okay, I'm not going to go crazy spending all this money until I know this is going to be a thing. And here we are, 2 years later, I think it is going to be a thing, and I still haven't really upgraded yet.
I think it is a thing. I think it's rather successfully a thing. Jen, what microphone are you currently using?
I have the Zoom H2 mic. My dad bought this for music recording, and I then used it for ghost hunting. And so now it's coming. Yeah, now it's coming in handy for podcasting.
So let's see. So you said that you have the current full-time job, but you are going full-time on this. You're going all in on June or July 1st?
July 1st.
Yeah, June 1st would be just going into WWDC. That might be
right. Yeah.
And we'll talk about more of that in the second half. But let's talk about the financial side of things, because a lot of people tend to worry about the time commitment. I'll admit that, I'm pleased after almost 3 years of doing the podcast, I've got a podcast edit down to about a day or two, total of maybe 6 to 7 hours. But when I started out, it was taking me 15 to 20 hours to edit one of these shows, and it's only a 40-minute show. A lot of people may be really concerned about the time because you don't see a lot of financial feedback on these things initially or sometimes for quite some time. So how does it work for you financially, if you don't mind me putting that question to you?
Oh, no, I talk about it all the time. I actually love talking about the business side of YouTube. So I have no problem sharing numbers or anything like that. But I want to echo your point, and I think it's very important that you're not going to see anything for like a year, year and a half, 2 years. And like you said, the time investment up front while you're learning all this, like you had to learn your podcasting edit. I had to learn Final Cut Pro. I had to learn lighting setups. Like it's so much to learn up front. So like you said, it's going to take you forever to make one video, but just keep in mind that time is going to shrink and shrink and shrink the more you do it, and you'll get it down, like you said, to a few hours. But back to the financial thing, it's like a snowball, and it just slowly happens. Like my first year on YouTube, I think I made like $4,000, but that's not YouTube ad money. That's with the YouTube business, you have like 10 different revenue streams. YouTube ad money that you get from like the pre-roll ads only makes up like 20% of your income, which is what I find fun about building this. Because I think as developers, ultimately we're all builders. Like we all like to build things. So for me, the fun part of this is like, okay, let me start a podcast as a revenue stream. Now that's fun to build. Oh, let me sell some merchandise like t-shirts. That's fun to build. Like I do it because it's fun to try to like build those revenue streams. So right now I make about a little under $2,000 a month, but that's with, again, 10 revenue streams. And I'll just run through them briefly. AdSense, Patreon. I don't know if anybody out there is familiar with Patreon. That helps out a bit. I do one-on-one coaching, like Google Hangouts, Skype calls. Do that for like an hourly rate. Have sponsors every once in a while. The podcast brings in some money. I'm a Ray Wenderlich affiliate. You can check out that link, get some books there. So you just have to manage like 10 different things, and it all comes together. Like no one revenue stream dominates for now. Because I think when I start doing video courses, I think that's going to be the main revenue stream, but haven't gotten there yet because those are very, very time consuming.
Do you suggest maybe some financial and business courses might be good for developers to have a better idea of how to manage all of this?
I definitely think it's good to have some of that knowledge. I don't know of any courses because I've never taken any. So my previous life was an Allstate insurance agent, and that was like a family-run business. So I got to, we had 3 Allstate offices around town. I got to run one of the offices. So I was familiar with kind of how businesses work and run. And then, the economics and finance degree, that kind of brings that side of things into it. So I think my prior life really helped out with kind of building this life, if that makes sense.
So let's talk about that transition from having a paycheck job to doing this full time. I assume that you start with at least a core of savings and some at least regular estimates of the income that you've gotten off of these new revenue streams.
Yeah, I always say like full time, and I'm doing air quotes for those listening on the podcast, because I'm going to do about 70% full-time YouTube content creation, and the other 30% is going to be spent contracting. And with the company I'm currently with, we've already worked up a deal that I'll stay on for like 10 hours a week, helping them out. So that little bit of contracting is what is going to really pay the bills and give me the flexibility to go all in on YouTube. And that's the beauty of development, being a software developer, is there's so many ways you can earn an income, right? You can be a full-time employee. You can be a freelancer and contractor. And when you're a freelancer and contractor, you can say, I want to work 70 hours a week, or you could say, I want to work 20 hours a week, if you can find the right contract. So if you find that flexibility, it can allow you to do other things. So that is what is allowing me to go, again, full time. But it's also, I want to stay in the industry because, I'm a little self-conscious about this. Like I've only been doing this for 4 years, not a long time. So I thought a lot about this, like, okay, how am I going to be like a thought leader, influencer, whatever you want to call it, teaching people when I've only done it 4 years. So I want to stay involved 30% of my time contracting, still getting experience with different code bases, different coding methodologies, all that stuff, so that I'm not just completely leaving the industry behind and going into teacher mode, right? So that's, even if I do make enough money off YouTube, I'm still probably going to always do 25 to 30% of my time in contracting for that reason.
And again, the target date for this is July 1.
Yeah, July 1, we're going to go daily videos, crazy number of I'm going to be a content creation machine. It's going to be awesome. Because that's been the frustrating part about this YouTube thing, is that like I feel like I've done what I've done to 40,000 subscribers, all that kind of stuff has been nights and weekends in my spare time over the past 2 years. So the biggest frustration with this YouTube channel is I see it, like you kind of said, it is a thing. Like I can see the success, I can see the path to making it even bigger, but the only thing I was lacking was time. And that was always the frustration. I always said to myself, like, man, just imagine what I could do if I was, full time. I always say I'm building this little fire, and whenever I go full time, that's like throwing gasoline on that fire. So I'm excited to throw gasoline on that fire and see what happens.
And we mentioned July 1 because, again, June 1, very, very different. We're going to be getting a whole new bunch of content to discuss from the upcoming WWDC. And I think at this point we should take a few moments break, let our sponsor, TripleByte, explain how it is possible to skip that scary interview part. And then when we come back, I'll talk about some of what those toys may be at WWDC. We'll be right back with the second half of the show right after this. This RayWenderlich.com podcast is brought to you by TripleByte. Applying to programming jobs sucks. You have to put the right keywords in your resume. You spend hours and hours on phone screens, take-home projects, and that's assuming the company even responds to your interest or your cover letters. Well, if you're a software engineer, TripleByte can help.
They work with over 400 top tech companies, from big names like Dropbox and Adobe to exciting startups. You do one brief online interview with them, and if you do well, you get to go straight to the final interviews with the companies on their platform. It's like the common app for software engineers. TripleByte does not look at your resume or where you went to school. All they care about is if you can code.
And I can appreciate that. Being in the industry for 35 years, I'm entirely self-taught. My undergraduate study was in theater, and I left school to do my first job, so I don't carry a bachelor's, no bachelor's of arts, no bachelor's of science, and that's the one thing I'm often trying to hide or misdirect on my resume. With TripleByte, they care more about the coding experience that I have and not worry about that one little fact.
Apply now at triplebyte.com/Ray. That's triplebyte.com, byte, BYTE, as in 8 bits. As a special offer for listeners of this show, if you take a job through TripleByte, they'll offer you a $1,000 signing bonus. Thanks again to our sponsor, TripleByte. That's Byte, BYTE. Now it's time for the second half of our show, where our WWDC-bound Season 9 co-host, Dru Freeman, will talk a bit more about what we're likely to see at WWDC this year. Dru?
Well, I'm excited. I haven't been back to the developer conference actually since before the lottery began. That's about 7 years. So I'll be curious to see how the show changes. But in general, it's always a really good time, and I'm jealous because you just got back from Google I/O.
Yes,
our
I
only
did.
time mentioning Android on this show, which we did a live cast, and I should point out that Monday, after all of the keynotes are over at about 8 p.m. Pacific time, we'll be doing a live cast to talk about what actually happened and how we felt about that. But today I've got Sean and Jen here to discuss what we think might happen, because this episode's going out about 4 days before that. So right off the bat, and we'll start with the Mac. The Mac has slowly become sort of the side child in the family, which is an interesting thing, having come all the way from the Apple days, and I mean the Apple II days. But I really am hoping that we're going to see a full Pro line refresh at this point. And by Pro line, I mean the iMac, the MacBook Pro, and I really, really hope that we're going to get to see that tower that they teased us, 2.5, 3 years ago, is it?
Yeah. They've been talking about that for a while. I'm actually terrified of the Pro line refresh because I'm a sucker. I always want to have the latest. I always want to, I always want to have the latest and greatest Apple stuff because it looks so cool. And I am looking at an iMac Pro right now that I bought for like video editing. And we all know the iMacs and iMac Pros have the same display with the huge bezels, right? It looks like it's from 2014. So if they come out with an amazing looking iMac Pro, this is what I'm terrified of. that might cost me a lot of money.
It surprises me because when the iMac Pro first came out, I looked at it and I said, I don't need it.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had to convince a coworker that he didn't need it either, because I realized by Pro, they really designed that device to be for video editors, for photo editors, for people who are working for major magazines or for major motion picture companies. If it's somebody like us who's just editing a couple of videos, or maybe, Sean, you're stepping up to that level where you would need it, but I realized I didn't need the Mac Pro. As much as I love the toys and I love having the best, greatest, I could actually sit back and go, I need an iMac. Like I fully expect that if they turn out a Pro Tower, that's designed for a major corporation to put into their build farms, or
For sure.
it's designed, or it's for somebody who's using Maya or something of that caliber.
Yeah. Oh no, I was going to say, talk about the iMac Pro. You absolutely don't need it for development or even just basic video editing. I will say I take it for granted because with my videos, so it depends on how much rendering you have to do. Like I have text and graphics like all over my videos and stuff like that, and my little face cam and stuff. So there's a lot going on. So the rendering times, like I went home for Christmas vacation for like 2 or 3 weeks, and I was creating videos on my 2016 MacBook Pro, which is still, 16 gig of RAM, pretty powerful. And it would take like 2 to 3 hours to render one of my Swift News videos. Whereas back here on the iMac Pro, it takes like 10, 15 minutes. So like I took it for granted, these rendering times, until I went there and I was like, oh, I love you, iMac Pro, I love you. So it is for video editing for sure. And people ask me all the time, like, oh, should I go in for development? And I'm like, absolutely not. Like it is way overkill for that. But like you said, video editing for sure. Go ahead, Jen.
Jen, what were you going to add in?
What is the advantage of the tower? What has you excited about that?
Oh, the tower, I'm really hoping that they've got expansibility figured out once and for all. So it's interesting because I always hear that complaint that the Mac isn't expandable, that once you buy it in a certain configuration, that configuration is forever, and people, quote, love to upgrade their devices. I remember speaking to a colleague of mine saying that they would never go Mac because they couldn't upgrade the device. And I said, well, when was the last time they upgraded their device? And the person looked at me and says, well, I don't. I just buy a new one. I was like, wait, no. But with the tower, I'm really excited to see how much power they're going to put into that thing. It's been a while. I think the expansibility, and Johnny Ive will put his fingerprints all over it anyway, so it'll just look, hopefully, not like a trash can.
Right. Well, I'm looking forward to these. Probably the companion to the tower is that display, the new 6K display that's been rumored.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen some of the, like 9 to 5 Mac, I think, had their idea of it, and it was an ultra wide. I don't know if they're going to do an ultra wide, but if they do, again, I'm a sucker. I'll probably buy it, even though I have no need for it, just because it looked, at least based on their render and their idea, it looked absolutely beautiful and looked like the perfect companion to an iMac, like side-by-side kind of thing. So that's what I'm looking forward to the most, to see what they do with that display.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that one's going to hurt if it comes out because I have a 27-inch display port that's getting a little long in the tooth, and I survive off of that one for doing the audio editing in Audition for the podcast. And yeah, I'm gonna have to
because your display is even like pre-Retina, right? It's not even a Retina display.
It's not a Retina display. Ooh. So yeah, and the white beard also signifies that these are the reading glasses that let me actually see the screen.
Right. Yeah.
So let's talk about the big one, and that is the Universal Apps / Marzipan. We talked about that on the last show, at least in some detail. I don't want to necessarily rehash everything we did on the last show, but it looks like, because there was a huge drop from, I think, Bloomberg News talking about all of the highlighted information, and that is that a whole bunch of iPad-style apps will be able to run on the Mac, that you'll be able to actually write your own basically iPad app and have it run on the Mac.
Yeah, I think this is great. I haven't had a chance to like really dive in and play with it, but what I do find is a lot of the new developers that are coming up, because I deal with a lot of them, are not going to build AppKit Mac apps. You know what I mean? So I think we're finding that the Mac is being a little neglected. So the main thing I'm looking forward to is that people that are going into iOS, iPhone, iPads, now their products, however cool they are, can now come to the Mac. So that's what I'm excited about, is the Mac getting more software to use.
Yeah, the problem is that we have a lot of really great caliber applications, especially in gaming and research, that are popping up on the on the iPad, but they just don't have the power that a real high processor would give them. And I wonder if this will be that marriage of you can use iPad development, make an iPad version, but then have that unbelievable multi-core power that can pop up behind it once you throw it onto the Mac. Which, of course, also means that, because we got the warning for the last one, 32-bit apps, they are gone forever.
I thought this happened like a year ago. Maybe I'm not up to date. Didn't they do a purge of all the old 32-bit apps, or was that just a warning?
I think that was the warning on the Mac, but the purge on the iPad.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're
and
right.
I guess that would make sense, that if you're going to now bring those iPad apps across to the Mac, you need to make sure that the Mac is 64-bit only as well. So, I mean, there's not a lot that we'll know. I mean, obviously, there'll be a lot of sessions on Marzipan, probably for the Mac, because there's going to be different interface things, dealing with the mouse, dealing with different types of clicks, dealing with the menu bar, etc. I'm really hoping they don't go the route of Java, where your menu bar consists of your app is running about this app, and then there's a walled garden. But yeah, it's hard to say. One of the tricky things as we move into iOS is the fact that a lot of the rumors that you see dumped on Bloomberg are primary keynote rumors. And we talked about this with the Google I/O, is that the primary keynote is not for the developer. Primary keynote is for the press and for the public to go, ooh, I'm getting new apps from Apple. And Apple's doing all these really great things. Then after that is the State of the Union, which is the keynote for developers. And that's basically where they say, here's how we pulled off all these new apps and all these new features in the OS and what you get your hands on.
Jen, does I/O do something similar? Do they do a keynote for the people and then a keynote for the developers?
They sure do. So the main keynote is for all audiences, I think, just to get excited about what's new from Google. And then the developer keynote is a lot more specific of what does that mean for developers. And it gets a little more technical.
Do they have a fancy name for it? Like Drew just said, Apple has the State of the Union. Keynote. Okay, cool. So very original.
Developer keynote.
Okay.
I think I've used State of the Union before too, or State of, I recall in previous years, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Well, Monday there was the keynote, the developer keynote, and then what's new in Android, right?
Yes, there's almost always another, and that's just a session, but that's generally a large session held in the amphitheater. So they put that in a large stage for obvious reasons. Usually people are competing for a spot in that one.
Yeah, so that will likely be the same, that Monday's keynotes will be the public keynote, the developer keynote, and then on Tuesday they'll start with what's new in iOS, what's new in macOS, what's new in watchOS. So in iOS, the one thing, obviously, now that they've finally moved to the OLED screens, is the dark mode that they put onto the Mac, they have to put onto the phone. Everybody's doing it now. It's interesting that concepts like dark mode have taken so long, but I guess that's because that's sort of been a developer thing for the longest time, and that we've always liked switching our terminals to dark. We like switching our apps to dark, but it has to be intelligent. You can't just flip everything, because then things go wrong.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of dark mode, and I didn't realize how much of a fan I was until I got used to it, and then went back to an app that didn't have it, and you just get blinded by that white screen. And you're like, what is this? So I can't wait for it on iOS.
Has iOS ever done dark mode before? Because I know Android kind of started out with a darker theme, but has iOS ever been dark centric, or is this the first time?
Not officially, right?
They have the accessibility setting, but the accessibility setting was never really curated to a fine detail that everybody could use it easily, or that there was any kind of API to help you deal with it.
Oh.
We are seeing a lot of apps like not wait for iOS though, like Twitter has their full-blown dark mode. So a lot of apps have started implementing their own dark mode before iOS has. So I'm curious how that's going to come into play.
Yeah.
Well, with any amount of luck, they stubbed it in a way that it's just going to be easy to throw the switch and say, okay, use these calls instead.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, Drew, it can be horrifying, like if you dark mode and it reverses a picture or something. So in the Android dark mode, you can exclude certain views because some views look absolutely terrible in dark mode. So
it will be interesting. It's similar to using right to left languaging, that you want to make sure that some things flip appropriately while other things like your graphics may not necessarily flip. So the fact that there's so much chatter about this means that, because Apple is so design driven, that they've really thought about what needs to change and how it needs to change. Now, I may be an outlier because on the Mac world, I actually prefer the light mode. I like it to sort of help me. Maybe it's because I need the light to help me concentrate. But in dark mode, where I use my iOS device the most annoyingly to people is when I'm getting into bed, my wife's trying to sleep, and being as though she's hard of hearing, the noise from the phone doesn't bother her, but any amount of light coming out of that device does. And with the OLED screen, we'll get actual dark. The blacks will actually be switched off black, and that'll be a nice change. Let's see. Now, one of the other apps, now, obviously a whole slew of apps that we're used to coming from Apple will now be moving over to the from the iOS world to the Mac world. One of the ones that I've always felt was a great missing app was the Find My Phone or Find My Friends app. I find that app, well, with a large family, to be something that's absolutely necessary. But I'm wondering whether or not that they're going to open an API into that at all, that you can actually find out battery information or find out location information. That seems to usually be pretty much a black box, just due to the privacy concerns behind that one.
Yeah, I'm not a big user of this app. I don't know. I've actually never used Find My Friends. Can you talk about some of the situations where you've used it, like as a big family, like you mentioned?
Well, the best situation for Find My Friends has been my mother-in-law or myself, because I'm currently traveling back and forth between Canada and Pittsburgh. My mother-in-law lives in Maine, so she's visiting as she's homeschooling my son. And as a result, it's good to know, well, how far is she in her progress for the trip, or how far am I in the progress of the trip? It also is a good way to say, hi, I'm about to hit customs, and people can tell if I've gotten out of customs or I'm still there.
Oh, no, that's a very good point. Real quick, are you from Pittsburgh? Are you living in Pittsburgh?
I've been in Pittsburgh for half my life.
Okay. I'm from Erie, Pennsylvania, so not too far away.
Ah, the fifth state of Pennsylvania.
Right, yeah, right on the lake. The mistake on the lake is what we
Oh, I thought that was Cleveland.
I think a lot of cities might have that name.
As I lose a small portion of listeners.
Right.
So then we move on to the series of apps that move around that are what we like to refer to as Sherlocking apps. And those are the apps that may possibly encroach on other people's businesses that exist currently. Apple has continued to try to enrich their Files app, which is basically their file system into iCloud, which is sort of their Dropbox competitor. It's been good on iOS, but it still seems to be a little bit foreign to be. It seems more like an app than a file system. And then that file system seems to work as a file system on the Mac and less of an app. So it looks like they're going to try to find a sort of a halfway point. But this one, I definitely expect to see some growth in the APIs, specifically because you need to have that less than sandboxed feeling when you're doing files.
Yeah, I echo. I don't use it kind of for the reason you said. It doesn't feel like a file system. So I've literally never even used that app. But I love the concept of it. It's just, I don't know, never used it.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because a lot of the apps now, it's like, do you want to save your backups to iCloud? And you forget that you can go to iCloud and take a look at these files or manage them or take care of them. But Dropbox still has a much better feel to that, even though when Dropbox is on iOS, it's still got that same app-like feeling. So I'll be curious to see whether or not they're going to try to get more of a file system feeling on iOS. The other Sherlocking system that we feel is coming up is that SwiftKey has a keyboard that lets you swipe through the letters to generate words. And we know that Apple's really all about machine learning now. So the question is a rumor that says that the SwiftKey swiping keyboard will now be something, not Swift keys, but a swiped keyboard so that you can actually just roll through the letters. And I know a lot of these changes, the average Android listener says, oh, you finally caught up.
I've been using the swiping keyboard for a while now. I do find it speeds me up a lot. At first, I didn't like it. And I was like, what's the advantage? But for me, I can finger type a lot faster.
That's what I was going to ask, Jen, because I've never used a swiping keyboard. What's the learning curve? Like you said, at first you didn't like it. How long did it take you to like it?
Not long. I would say maybe a day. And I got attached to the Gboard because you could put a background on it and it had fun features for searching GIFs. Mm-hmm. And I had just used the stock keyboard for however long. But it didn't take me long at all, maybe about half a day. So maybe the first 3 times I tried it, I was like, oh, what's the point? But then you can also do it easy. You can type easier one-handed that way too. So if I'm holding my phone in one hand, I can thumb type much easier because you don't have to have as much accuracy.
Yeah, that might be worth me trying, because one of the things I don't like, I love the bigger phones, but one thing I don't like about it is now I've switched to a 2-hand texter and not a 1-hand texter. So it's going to put me back to a 1-hand texter. Maybe I might give it a try.
And I forget what those things are called, but the things you can stick on the back of your phone, so I can hold with one hand and then I can type. If I position that just right, I can reach the whole keyboard with my thumb.
Nice.
Even though the phones are a little large for my hands, I can do it one-handed. So that's nice.
I have to, you gave me a laugh there because as somebody who is predominantly an iOS user, I didn't realize they use the term Gboard. But
I might be outdated too. There might be cooler technology for keyboards on Android these days, but I got attached to the Google's keyboard when it came out, so to get rid of this stock keyboard.
Apple co-opted the letter I. It's of course obvious that Google should co-opt the letter G.
Yeah, the iBoard. You guys will have an iBoard. I mainly wanted to be able to search emojis because it would take me forever to find the emoji I wanted.
Emojis and GIFs. That's really all that matters, right?
Yeah.
So diving in, some of the more recent things that have been introduced for developers have been things like Siri Kit and CarPlay. And with the introduction of the HomePod, Siri Kit obviously has to get some love. One of the problems that people have had with that is the single voice programming. The current dropped rumor is that there'll be multi-voices, which will be interesting if there's an API into that lets you detect voices for your specific apps.
I really hope Siri Kit gets a lot of love because, right, Siri was like the first voice assistant, but now it's like in last place. Like every company has like surpassed it. And I agree. Like I haven't gotten a HomePod yet because there's not a lot of good Siri use for it. But I really want Siri to turn into like Alexa skills. I hope they're going to do that where you can like actually program skills for Siri Kit. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I want it to evolve into something like that.
Well, I know they
has a bit of on Siri there.
Yeah, just a little bit.
They introduced the Siri shortcuts and the shortcut app, but yeah, I think seeing more programmability there, I think is going to lead its success, but it does lack quite a bit. I was happy that Siri got a bit of a voice update to sound a little less mechanical, but Siri does continue to lag a bit there.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if Siri if there was just a iOS release that was nothing but Siri benefits. Like, I think it's that important because I think everything is, not everything, but I think we're really shifting to voice commands. And it makes me sad that Apple is so far behind in this area.
And obviously one of the places that, I'm sorry, Jen, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say Apple needs a nice celebrity to do their voices. Like, we've got the John Legend Google Assistant voice now. So Siri, you need some celebrities to...
Is that the only? Do they have John Legend and a bunch of others, or is it just John Legend?
There's 6 you can choose from, and I think John Legend was the most recognizable name.
Right.
I don't know if the others are known personalities, but yeah, they need to get a known personality to do Siri's voice.
See, in my luck, we get Gilbert Gottfried.
Right. Yeah. I'm fighting. I was just going to say, I'm fighting the urge to do an impression. I don't want to embarrass myself.
So obviously the one place that it's really important to have the voice controls is going to be in the car. I finally had the opportunity to ride in a rental car that had CarPlay, and yes, I'm a sucker, and I want that in my next car because it really attaches well to the apps that I need to be using in a car without being the distraction that an iPhone or any mobile can be. It creates a car HUD, a heads-up display for the apps that I'm using. I'm a chronic Waze user for my mapping. I avoid both Google Maps and Apple Maps. And Waze has done an extension for CarPlay, and CarPlay continues to mature each release. It's not an area that I program in, but it definitely seems to be something that they continue to put a lot of development efforts into.
Yeah, I'm way out of touch when it comes to this because I haven't owned a car in 5 years. Living in downtown San Francisco, it's kind of pointless to have a car and expensive. It's $250 just for a parking spot in my apartment, which is insane. But my sister just got a car with CarPlay in it, and she says, "Oh my gosh, you have to see this. It's amazing." So next time I visit her, I'm definitely going to check it out.
See, now all of a sudden I want to see an iOS app called Bike Play or something like that. So you basically turn your iOS device, you attach it to the handlebars, and it runs CarPlay.
There you go.
That
Trademark
would be great.
2019. All right, so let's talk about the other things that Apple really has been advancing in recently, and that is, I've missed one from my outline, but that is machine learning, AR, and the NFC. We'll start with the NFC because that's really off to the side of the other two. Apple Pay itself has been a golden ticket for them, and they are coming out with the new credit card, and they're beginning to also put in different types of mass transit tickets. I'm hoping one of the things that they'll work on now is things like store cards, because it really has been a shortcoming that my wallet is great for about a third of my wallet, and I want the wallet to basically become all of my wallet. I like the idea. When I'm traveling in Canada, where a lot of things take tap payment, my wallet very rarely comes out of my wallet. My wallet rarely comes out of my pocket. My wallet rarely comes out, period.
Yeah.
But I really feel that there is some expense there too, as more cards move to contactless, that we may see more in the NFC. Another area of NFC that would be very nice is, I don't know what they use out on the west or the southwest. Out in the northeast, there's Easy Pass, which is an NFC that works for pretty much all toll roads out here.
Oh, nice.
They use Easy Pass out here in San Francisco too. Like I said, don't have experience with it because I don't have a car, but I do know when you go over the Bay Bridge, there's an Easy Pass.
Yeah,
So,
our tolls are mostly just a credit card, or they have the cameras above the road to get your license plate, which is convenient.
and then people shade out their license plates so that you can't see them clearly, and that's always interesting.
Oh, no.
So at the core of a lot of this stuff is machine learning. And machine learning has just been growing on both platforms amazingly. At Google I/O, they talked about how machine learning is trying to actually open up the black box of how biases are determined. It was something that really got my attention. And Apple has done a very good job of putting initially the ability to just grab those pre-taught models and distribute them out into the app. Now they're actually beginning to feed some of the learning process back to the model, and that's rather interesting. Do either of you have any feeling on where machine learning might move from here?
I'm not super up on machine learning. One thing I'm looking forward to is them to actually get it on device, which I think we might still be a generation or two away. Because I think that is going to really open up a lot. But as far as like getting in there and building stuff with it, I haven't done that yet.
Yeah, I think I could actually see them having the machine learning ability on iOS this time around. I could see them trying to push the machine learning kit onto watchOS.
Oh, wow.
So that you can actually just have that. You can squeeze a lot of information onto the watch. You'd be surprised. The app that I've been talking about throughout the season, I've actually got the JPL library on the watch, so that you can actually do astronomical lookups through the watch extension.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and all that's being done right on the watch, like you said. It's not tethering to the phone.
Yeah, so I can actually tell you the astronomical positions of the sun and the moon at any point on the watch.
Nice.
That's really cool.
And of course, with machine learning, we also get into AR. And AR is just a lot of fun. I don't think we are, as of yet, ready for Apple to introduce a wearable for AR. I'm pretty sure that Apple's working on a wearable for AR. They'd be crazy not to be.
Right.
You mean like Google Glass?
I think everybody's
not like Google Glass. It's not going to be like Google Glass.
I think everybody's still kind of stung by Google Glass, and I think that's one of the things that slowed Apple down, is that how do you make a wearable knowing that Google Glass did not succeed? And what was it about Google Glass that failed so badly? That's another real question there. You've got so much to deal with in an eye wearable. You're dealing with focal length, etc. With that, you're also dealing with whether or not you can reach out and touch things. So we know that with AR, they've done a fantastic job with facial recognition. I had spoken on a previous show about whether or not they'd be able to start watching eye movements, because Apple's accessibility and the way they tie in has been fantastic on things like facial movement. And I'd love to see them tie their AR facial movement into their accessibility.
Yeah, AR kit and voice are kind of like the two things I want to champion, because that's the future I see. Is AR glasses, and way into the future, maybe even contact lenses, like, because technology gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So the Google Glass, kind of your question was like, why did it fail? I don't think it was stylish enough. I think you looked like a certain type of person by wearing that. I just didn't think it really and I'm confident Apple will come up with a stylish version, right? Even if they get made fun of at first. Look at AirPods. Everybody in the world made fun of AirPods when they come out. Now everybody has them and everybody loves them, So I think Apple will be fine. And this is the future. Like you kind of said, we're not ready for it. I don't think AR kit's going to take off until we have glasses. Because as long as you have to hold your phone up to look through AR, it's not going to work.
I like to refer to it as the 3-arm problem. It's like, to really use AR, you need 2 arms on the phone and 1 arm to operate whatever it is you want to operate.
Yeah, until the glasses are going to be the unlock. And as we all know with technology, the first version isn't going to be great. It's going to take 4 or 5 years after that first version comes out. But that's the future I see, is the AR kit with glasses, with everything being voice commands, which is why I want Siri to hurry up and catch up.
Well, I mean, if AR is going to take a good 3 to 4 years, then Siri has a good 3 to 4 years to meet that destination point. And somewhere in Apple has got to be that roadmap that we'd all kill to see.
Yeah.
One thing we saw at Google I/O, and I wish I'd remembered this for our live podcast, for the keynote, one of the coolest things is they had AR where they had maps about the complex, and you could scan a little symbol on the map, and then it would hang markers in AR. So you could move your phone around and like see stage 1 is way off in the distance, stage 2. So it was like 3D markers in AR. That is a cool application for AR. That blew me away.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what they're going to do for the WWDC app this year. It's typically just schedule and videos, and that's about it. But we'll see how that goes.
It should be coming out soon, though, right? I would say about a week or two in advance, they update it and start dropping it.
Somewhere I read that there is a pavilion being set up on Apple campus for something on the 17th.
I did see it's like a rainbow looking thing. I did see
the rainbow kind of pavilion for something that they're planning on the 17th. I have a feeling that there's going to be some kind of internal announcement, and then once that's out, then they'll move up. I mean, as always, people at Apple only know so much as well, because they spoon feed all of their releases there.
Sure, yeah. Still can't stop the leaks, though.
I'm curious how Bloomberg got away with the amount that they published.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd like to see besides the voice and the AR, Sean?
Well, these are all like consumer type products, if you will. I'm always excited for the advancements in Xcode, just to kind of, because that's what we live in and deal with every day. So that what's new in Xcode, thing that they always do is always my favorite part of the State of the Union. So I don't have any predictions. I always never know what they do, but it is always the most thing I'm excited for. It used to be what's new in Swift, but now that I've started following Swift evolution and reporting on that, I know everything that's going to be in Swift 5.1. I've looked at it, I've played with it. So that's almost a useless session for me. But the what's new in Xcode, that's what I'm excited for.
I follow some of the Swift evolution, but I still like the what's new in Swift, because they basically take the ones that are the real highlights and break them down and go through them. So there's a little bit of a tutorial there. Xcode, absolutely. I know that they've been slowly transitioning to the new build process. They may just basically say, you're now using the new build system. But yeah, Xcode is usually a whole bucket full of surprises.
Yeah, and again, the main reason selfishly I love this week is it's just content galore. I can get 2 to 3 weeks of tutorials and videos out of this. So not only am I learning about all the new stuff, but it helps the business as well.
Yeah, the one thing that really drove me to needing to go to WWDC, it stopped being the videos years ago. There was a time where the videos, you were lucky if they came out on DVD a year later, just before the following dub. This is decades. Eventually, it got to the point where you get them within a couple of months and a couple of weeks, and now it's that day.
Right.
And you really don't need to go to WWDC if you're just going for the videos. What they have there are the engineers, the labs, where you can actually sit down and say, this isn't working, talk to me. It's just like all of your assets that you get as a developer for technical support is there. And more importantly, they have people there from the design team, from the app approval team, and you can sit there going, okay, so what are you going to bounce on my app, and what can we talk about now and get that out of the way?
And to kind of build on that, that is absolutely true, but kind of bring this full circle back to what we talked about earlier, building your online presence, networking, and meeting a bunch of different people, via Twitter and stuff. Developers from all over the world descend upon the Bay Area during this time. So if you're fortunate enough to, even if you don't have a ticket, but just to be in San Jose during that time, you're actually going to get to meet in person all these people you got to meet on the internet and Twitter, and that just builds that deeper relationship. And I think we all know the network is one of the most powerful things you have as a developer, and that can lead to many opportunities.
Yeah, I think the most important thing, if you're going to be in San Francisco for WWDC week, the most important thing to bring, more important than a power pack, more important than chargers, batteries, cords, is business cards.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And the simplest business card, the better, because there are so many companies out there trying to make business cards that make you look more important than you are. A simple business card, something with your name, your Twitter, your blog, or maybe just a QR code.
That's brilliant. Just yeah, I thought of doing a business card with like just my Twitter handle on one side and then like basic contact on the other, because if there's too much to read, people don't read it. They just toss it aside, forget who you were.
Yeah, just put your QR code on your badge.
That's smart.
Wow.
Wow.
Hold it up. Yeah, there you go.
People just take a camera to your badge, get all your information, you're good to go.
Done.
That's
now you can spend the next couple of days trying to figure out what goes into your QR code.
But I do think that's an important note, because I think developers tend to be like introverted. And if you go there and don't know anybody, you might not get involved in the conversation. I know it's tough, but I would recommend doing your best to kind of overcome that fear and get in there and meet people. Because like I said, they're developers from all kinds of companies from all over the world are going to be there. Like, take advantage of that.
And all experience levels. I actually have a T-shirt from WWDC 1998 that I'm going to be getting printed on the back. This T-shirt is now old enough to drink.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Which is great, because then you walk up to all of the scholarship winners and you go, uh-huh.
Oh, yeah. Now you really feel old.
Sean, this has been amazing. I really appreciate all the information that you've given me given us on putting this stuff together and building it up. I am the same way. I started the podcast about 2.5. Well, I picked up the podcast about 2.5 years ago. I was lucky that it had the audience already built in, but just the way it's built up over the time has been amazing. I've got to work with now 3 amazing co-hosts, and it continues to grow, and I continue to look at new things. I actually did my first con speech about a year ago, and it does begin to just become an addiction, things that you just want to put more in.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot of fun too.
But so, Sean, I want to thank you again for making the show today. It's really a pleasure and an honor to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun. Jen, Drew, it's great to meet you. Maybe Drew, maybe I'll see you at WW this year. Maybe meet in person.
I hope so. I'll be looking out. All I have to do is search for beards.
There you go.
Sean, on Twitter, you're SeanAllen_dev.
That is correct.
As always, and you're Jen.codes.
Yeah.
And I am podcast Dru, DRU. You can find us on Twitter, or in the show notes, there'll be links to a lot of what we discussed. And of course, then about a week later, WWDC will happen, and we'll find out how everything we did in the second half of the show was wrong. Coming up in 2 weeks after this show, we've got John Sundell, an open source developer and podcaster, who will be on the show. That'll be on Wednesday, June 12th. In the meantime, that's going to wrap things up for this episode number 4. Again, we thank Triple Byte, 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 like in 8 bits, for sponsoring this show and every show this season. In the meantime, we head back to the Emerald Castle. Ray, back to you.
And that's a wrap. Thanks again, everybody, for listening to the RayWenderlich.com podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to leave a rating on iTunes. See you next time.